Marcus Chen had been awake for 3 days when the Vorthak warship found his damaged mining vessel drifting near the Kepler belt. His emergency beacon had been sending distress signals for weeks, but instead of a rescue ship, he got something far worse. The alien vessel was massive, at least 10 times the size of his small mining craft. Its dark hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving it an ominous presence against the star field. Marcus watched through his cracked viewport as mechanical arms extended from the alien ship, gripping his vessel like a predator catching prey. He had heard stories about the Vorthak. Every human in the outer colonies knew the tales. They were a warrior species that had been expanding their territory for centuries. They took prisoners, but not for ransom or negotiation. They took them for sport. The airlock hissed as it was breached. Marcus grabbed the plasma cutter from his tool belt, the only weapon he had. It was meant for cutting through asteroid rock, not fighting aliens, but it was better than nothing. He positioned himself behind a support beam and waited. The first Vorthak soldier to enter was huge. It stood nearly 8 feet tall with gray-scaled skin and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Its head was elongated, with small red eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. The creature wore armor that looked like it was made from the bones of some massive beast. Marcus held his breath as more soldiers entered. There were 6 of them, moving with practiced precision. They spread out through his small ship, searching every corner. Their weapons looked advanced. Some kind of energy rifles that hummed with power. When they found him, Marcus tried to fight. He managed to burn one soldier's arm with the plasma cutter before they overwhelmed him. The aliens were strong, much stronger than any human. They didn't seem angry about the injury he had caused. If anything, they seemed pleased. The largest Vorthak, obviously the leader, examined Marcus like he was studying an interesting specimen. It spoke in a language that sounded like grinding rocks mixed with electronic static. A small device on its belt translated the words into standard English. "A human warrior," the leader said, its voice carrying a tone of amusement. "How interesting. You will provide excellent entertainment in the proving grounds." Marcus was dragged aboard the Vorthak ship. The interior was just as dark and intimidating as the outside. The walls were covered with what looked like trophies, skulls, claws, and other body parts from various alien species. Some looked human. They threw him into a holding cell that was barely large enough for him to lie down. The walls were made of some kind of metal that felt warm to the touch. There was no furniture, just a small hole in one corner that served as a waste disposal system. A slot in the door occasionally opened to deliver a bowl of gray liquid that tasted like motor oil, but apparently contained enough nutrients to keep him alive. For the first week, Marcus tested every inch of his cell. He looked for weaknesses, loose panels, anything he could use to escape. The metal was too strong to damage with his bare hands, and there were no obvious flaws in the construction. The door was solid, with no visible hinges or handles on his side. During this time, he could hear sounds from other parts of the ship. Sometimes there were screams. Sometimes there was cheering. Sometimes there was the sound of weapons firing. He began to understand what the proving grounds meant. Other prisoners were brought past his cell occasionally. Most were alien species he didn't recognize, but he saw at least 3 other humans. They all had the same look in their eyes: defeat. They had given up hope. Marcus refused to give up. On the 8th day, 2 guards came to his cell. They were different from the soldiers who had captured him. These ones were smaller, only about 6 feet tall, with smoother scales and fewer scars. They carried electric prods instead of rifles. "Time for evaluation, human," one of them said through the translator. "The War Master wants to see what you can do." They led him through the ship's corridors. Marcus memorized every turn, every door, every detail he could. Information would be his best weapon now. The ship was larger than he had realized, with multiple levels connected by ramps and lifts. Most of the crew ignored him, but he noticed how they moved, how they carried their weapons, how they interacted with each other. The evaluation chamber was a circular room with high walls. The floor was covered with sand that had dark stains, blood from previous fights. Weapons hung from racks along the walls, everything from simple clubs to advanced energy weapons. In the center of the room was a raised platform where several Vorthak officers sat watching. The largest one, wearing armor that was obviously ceremonial rather than practical, had to be the War Master. Its scales were darker than the others, almost black, and it wore a helmet made from what looked like a human skull. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, but forced himself to stay calm. "Welcome to your new life, human," the War Master said, its translated voice echoing in the chamber. "You will fight for our entertainment. If you win enough battles, you might live long enough to die with honor. Most don't." A gate opened on the far side of the arena, and Marcus's first opponent entered. It was a creature he had never seen before, something that looked like a cross between a lizard and a spider. It had 6 legs, each ending in razor-sharp claws, and a mouth full of teeth that dripped with green saliva. "Choose your weapon, human," the War Master commanded. Marcus walked to the weapon rack. Most of the weapons were designed for creatures larger and stronger than humans. The energy weapons required strength he didn't have to operate effectively. But there was one thing that caught his eye. A simple steel blade, about the length of his forearm. It was probably meant as a backup weapon for one of the guards. The creature attacked as soon as Marcus picked up the blade. It was fast, faster than anything that size should be able to move. Its claws scraped against the arena floor as it circled him, looking for an opening. Marcus had never been trained for combat, but he had worked in dangerous environments his entire life. Mining asteroids required quick reflexes and the ability to think under pressure. When equipment failed in space, you had seconds to solve the problem or die. The creature lunged at him, all 6 legs spread wide to prevent him from dodging. Instead of trying to avoid it, Marcus did something unexpected. He dropped to the ground and rolled directly under the creature's belly, slashing upward with the blade as he passed. The cut wasn't deep enough to kill, but it was enough to wound. Green blood dripped onto the sand as the creature spun around to face him again. Now it was angry as well as hungry. The watching Vorthak made sounds that might have been laughter or approval. Marcus couldn't tell which, and he didn't care. He was focused entirely on staying alive. The creature was more cautious now, circling at a distance. Marcus used the time to study it, looking for weaknesses. Its legs were thin where they joined the body. Its eyes were large and unprotected. Its movements followed a pattern: 3 steps left, pause, 2 steps right, pause. When it attacked again, Marcus was ready. He sidestepped at exactly the right moment and brought the blade down on one of its front legs. The limb separated cleanly, and the creature stumbled. Before it could recover, Marcus was behind it, driving the blade into the base of its skull. The arena fell silent as the creature collapsed. Marcus stood over its body, breathing hard, still holding the bloody blade. He looked up at the War Master, who was studying him with new interest. "Interesting," the War Master said. "Very interesting indeed. Most humans don't survive their first battle." Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the best response. "You will fight again tomorrow," the War Master continued, "and the day after that. Each battle will be harder than the last. Eventually, you will die. But perhaps you will provide better entertainment than most." They took him back to his cell, but this time he noticed things he had missed before. Guard rotations changed every 6 hours. The guards were less alert during the night cycle. The weapon storage was 2 levels down from his cell. Small details that might be important later. That night, as he lay on the hard floor of his cell, Marcus thought about home. He had grown up on Mars Colony, where his parents had been terraforming engineers. They had taught him that humans were survivors, that they could adapt to any environment, overcome any challenge. The other species in the galaxy might be stronger or faster or more advanced, but humans had something else: the ability to learn, to change, to find a way when there was no way. The Vorthak thought they had captured just another prisoner to throw into their arena for entertainment. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Marcus Chen had spent his life surviving in the vacuum of space, extracting resources from lifeless rocks, turning the impossible into routine. Now he had a new job. He was going to teach these aliens why humans had spread across the galaxy despite being weaker and smaller than most other species. He was going to show them what happened when you cornered something that refused to die. The next morning brought his second fight. This time his opponent was another prisoner, a tall, thin alien with 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like a chameleon. It had been in the arena longer than Marcus, and it moved with the confidence of someone who had won many battles. But confidence could be a weakness, too. The alien expected Marcus to fight like the other creatures it had faced before. It expected him to rely on strength or natural weapons he didn't have. Instead, Marcus used the arena itself. He grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at the alien's eyes, temporarily blinding it. While it was distracted, he picked up a piece of bone from a previous fight and used it to trip the alien as it stumbled around trying to clear its vision. The alien fell hard, and Marcus was on top of it immediately. He didn't have claws or fangs, but he had something else: the ability to recognize that the alien's neck joint was unprotected, and the knowledge that a sharp piece of bone could penetrate it if applied with enough force and the right angle. The watching Vorthak were louder this time. Some were making sounds that the translator couldn't interpret, but the tone seemed more excited than before. After 3 more fights, Marcus began to understand the pattern. The Vorthak weren't just watching for entertainment. They were studying him, learning how humans fought. Each opponent was chosen to test a different aspect of his abilities. But Marcus was studying too. He was learning about Vorthak society, about their technology, about their weaknesses. Every day in the arena taught him something new about his captors. He noticed that the guards were less disciplined than they appeared. They had routines that they followed without thinking. They relied too heavily on their technology and not enough on their instincts. Most importantly, they underestimated him because he was small and appeared weak. Marcus began to plan. Escape wasn't just about getting out of his cell. It was about getting off the ship, and that meant he needed to understand how it operated. He started paying attention to things that seemed unimportant. How long did it take for the ship's systems to cycle? What sounds indicated shift changes? Which corridors were used most frequently? 3 weeks into his captivity, something changed. The Vorthak brought in a new group of prisoners, and among them was someone Marcus recognized: Sarah Kim, a security officer from Titan Station. She had been captured during a raid on a supply convoy. Sarah was in the cell next to his. Through careful whispers during the periods when the guards were distracted, they began to share information. Sarah told him about the Vorthak fleet movements, about their raids on human settlements. Marcus told her what he had learned about the ship's layout and guard routines. "They're planning something big," Sarah whispered during one of their conversations. "I heard them talking before they put me in here. They've been gathering prisoners from multiple species. It's not just for entertainment." Marcus had suspected as much. The arena fights were too organized, too purposeful. The Vorthak were testing different species, learning their combat techniques and weaknesses. It was intelligence gathering disguised as sport. That night, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to wait for rescue or hope for mercy. He was going to take action. The Vorthak had made one crucial mistake. They thought that capturing him meant they controlled him. They were about to learn otherwise. The plan he began forming was simple in concept, but complex in execution. He would need to turn the Vorthak's own systems against them. He would need to use their confidence as a weapon. Most importantly, he would need to become something they didn't expect. Marcus Chen, mining engineer from Mars colony, was about to become something the Vorthak had never encountered before. He was about to become their worst nightmare. The transformation had already begun, though the aliens didn't realize it yet. With each fight, with each day of captivity, Marcus was becoming harder, smarter, more dangerous. He was learning to think like a predator instead of prey. Soon, the Vorthak would learn why humans had earned their place among the stars. They would discover that sometimes, when you think you've captured a helpless victim, you've actually trapped yourself with something far more dangerous than you imagined. The first phase of Marcus's real war was about to begin. Marcus had been fighting in the arena for 37 days when he killed his first Vorthak. It wasn't supposed to happen. The fight was meant to be a test against a young Vorthak warrior, barely out of training. The creature stood 7 feet tall and carried traditional weapons, a curved blade in each of its 4 hands. It was supposed to demonstrate Vorthak's superiority over human prisoners. The War Master had grown more interested in Marcus over the past month. His survival rate was unusual, and his fighting methods were unlike anything they had seen from humans before. Most humans fought with desperation or rage. Marcus fought with calculation. The young Vorthak entered the arena with confidence bordering on arrogance. Its scales gleamed with ceremonial oil, and its weapons were polished to a mirror shine. The watching crowd of Vorthak officers expected a quick, decisive victory that would end the humans' winning streak. Marcus picked up his usual weapon, the simple steel blade that had become his signature. By now, he knew its weight, its balance, its capabilities better than anything else in his life. The Vorthak had offered him larger, more impressive weapons, but he always chose the same blade. The fight began like many others. The Vorthak attacked with textbook form, using all 4 weapons in a coordinated pattern that should have overwhelmed any opponent. Marcus had seen this style before, had studied it in his previous fights. He knew its strengths and, more importantly, its weaknesses. The key weakness was timing. Vorthak combat doctrine emphasized overwhelming force, but it required precise coordination between all 4 arms. If that coordination was disrupted, even for a moment, gaps appeared in their defense. Marcus didn't try to block the attack directly. Instead, he did something that violated everything the Vorthak knew about combat. He threw his weapon. The blade spun through the air and struck the young warrior's upper left hand, causing it to drop one of its swords. The break in rhythm was tiny, less than a second, but it was enough. Marcus rolled forward, grabbed the dropped weapon, and used its curved design to hook behind the warrior's knee. The Vorthak fell backward, off balance. Marcus was already moving, retrieving his thrown blade and using both weapons to target the joints where the alien's armor was weakest. The fight was over in seconds. The arena was completely silent. Marcus stood over the body of the young Vorthak, both blades dripping with blue blood. He looked up at the War Master, whose red eyes seemed to glow brighter than usual. "Impossible," one of the officers whispered, the translator picking up the word and broadcasting it clearly. The War Master stood slowly. Its massive frame cast a shadow over the arena floor. "Take the human back to his cell," it commanded. "I need to think." That night Marcus could hear heated discussions throughout the ship. The Vorthak were arguing about something, their voices carrying through the metal walls. He caught fragments through the translation system, words like dangerous, unexpected, and recommendation. Sarah spoke to him through the wall between their cells. "Something's changed," she whispered. "The guards are nervous. I've never seen them nervous before." She was right. The next morning, Marcus noticed that his food portions had increased. The guards who brought it didn't look at him directly, and they moved more carefully around his cell. Word had spread throughout the ship about what had happened in the arena. For the next week, there were no fights. Marcus used the time to refine his plan. He had been studying the ship's routine for over a month now, and he had identified several opportunities. The key was timing and making sure Sarah could play her part. The plan required him to lose his next fight. Not die, but lose badly enough that the Vorthak would think he was broken. It went against every instinct he had developed, but sometimes retreat was the best strategy. When they brought him to the arena again, his opponent was a creature unlike any he had faced before. It looked like a walking tank, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plating, with arms that ended in bone hammers instead of hands. The thing moved slowly but with unstoppable force. Marcus put up a convincing fight, but he let the creature catch him. One blow from those bone hammers sent him flying across the arena. He stayed down longer than he needed to, letting the watching Vorthak see him struggle to stand. When he finally did get up, he made sure to favor his left leg, acting like it was injured. The creature hit him twice more before Marcus managed to find a weak spot in its armor. He won the fight, but barely. When it was over, he collapsed to his knees, acting exhausted and hurt. The performance worked. The Vorthak relaxed slightly. The human was still dangerous, but he wasn't invincible. He could be hurt, could be worn down. They began to plan his next fights with renewed confidence. 3 days later, Marcus put his escape plan into action. It started during the night cycle, when most of the crew was asleep. Marcus had been working on a weak spot in his cell wall for weeks, using a small piece of metal he had hidden after one of his fights. The work was slow and careful. He could only do it when the guards weren't listening, and he had to make sure the damage wasn't visible during inspections. Finally, he had weakened a section enough that he could push it inward. The gap was barely large enough for him to squeeze through, but it led to a maintenance corridor that ran behind the cell blocks. Marcus slipped through the gap and immediately went to Sarah's cell. She was ready, having prepared her own escape route using a similar method. Together, they moved through the ship's maintenance areas, avoiding the main corridors where guards might see them. Their first stop was the armory. Marcus had memorized the guard rotation, and he knew they had a 20-minute window when this section would be unpatrolled. The armory door was secured with an electronic lock, but Sarah had military training that included basic computer systems. "Give me 3 minutes," she whispered, connecting a small device she had built from components smuggled out of the arena. While she worked on the lock, Marcus kept watch. The corridor was quiet, but he could hear the distant hum of the ship's engines and the occasional sound of footsteps from other levels. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The armory contained weapons from dozens of different species, some familiar, others completely alien. Marcus grabbed a plasma rifle that looked similar to ones used by human military forces. Sarah chose a weapon that resembled a shotgun but fired energy bolts instead of projectiles. Their next stop was the ship's computer core. This was where Sarah's real expertise came in. She had been a security officer on one of the largest stations in human space, and she understood computer networks better than most. "I need 15 minutes to access their navigation system," she told Marcus. "Can you keep any guards busy if they show up?" Marcus nodded and positioned himself at the entrance to the computer core. The chamber was filled with strange alien technology that pulsed with soft light. Sarah moved to a central console and began working, her fingers flying over controls that looked nothing like human interfaces. 7 minutes into the process, Marcus heard footsteps approaching. He signaled Sarah, who nodded but kept working. The footsteps belonged to 2 guards making their regular patrol. In another minute, they would reach the computer core and discover the breach. Marcus stepped into the corridor, making sure the guards saw him. Their reaction was immediate. Shouts of alarm, reaching for weapons, but Marcus had planned for this. He led them away from the computer core, down a corridor that ended in a dead end. The guards followed, thinking they had trapped the escaped prisoner. Instead, they had walked into an ambush. Marcus used the corridor's narrow width to his advantage, preventing them from using their superior size and strength effectively. The plasma rifle gave him range, and his human agility let him avoid their return fire. When the fight was over, both guards were dead. and Marcus had added their weapons to his collection. He made his way back to the computer core where Sarah was finishing her work. "Got it," she said, disconnecting her device from the alien console. "I've accessed their navigation system and planted a little surprise in their communication network." "What kind of surprise?" Sarah smiled grimly. "The kind that will make sure every human fleet in this sector knows exactly where this ship is and what the Vorthak have been doing here." They had accomplished their primary objectives, but Marcus wasn't done. The Vorthak had made the mistake of underestimating humans, and he intended to make sure they learned from that mistake in a way they would never forget. "There's something else I need to do," he told Sarah. "Get to the escape pods. Launch in exactly 30 minutes. "What about you?" "I have one more stop to make." Marcus made his way to the arena level. By now, alarms were beginning to sound throughout the ship. The Vorthak had discovered the dead guards and the breached cells. Soon they would realize that their computer systems had been compromised. But Marcus had 30 minutes. 30 minutes to send a message that would reach far beyond this single ship. The arena was empty except for maintenance drones preparing for the next day's entertainment. Marcus walked to the center of the sandy floor where he had fought so many battles. Then he began to work. Using charges he had taken from the armory, Marcus turned the arena into a giant explosive device. But this wasn't about destruction, it was about communication. The charges were arranged in a specific pattern, one that would leave a message visible from space. As he worked, Marcus thought about all the humans who had died in this arena, all the other species who had been brought here for the Vorthak's entertainment. The galaxy was full of predators who thought that strength was the only thing that mattered. They were about to learn otherwise. Marcus finished his work with 5 minutes to spare. As he made his way to the escape pod bay, he could hear the sounds of Vorthak soldiers searching the ship. They were getting closer, but they were too late. He found Sarah waiting in one of the smaller escape pods. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready?" Marcus confirmed, sealing the pod's hatch. The escape pod launched just as the Vorthak reached the bay. Marcus watched through the viewport as the alien ship grew smaller behind them. In the distance, he could see the navigation beacon Sarah had activated, sending their location to every human ship within range. 28 minutes after they launched, the charges in the arena detonated. The explosion wasn't large enough to destroy the ship, but it was visible across several light seconds of space. And when the blast cleared, it left behind something that would be talked about in taverns and military briefings across the galaxy. Burned into the hull of the Vorthak ship, visible to any passing vessel, was a single word in letters 50 meters tall, Reaper. The escape pod's communication system crackled to life. "Unknown craft, this is the UES Defiance. Please identify yourself." Sarah activated the response system. "This is Security Officer Sarah Kim, formerly of Titan Station. I have valuable intelligence about Vorthak operations and fleet movements." "Copy that, Officer Kim. We're bringing you aboard. Stand by for recovery." As the human warship grew larger in the viewport, Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Vorthak had thought they were capturing prey for their entertainment. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand. The name Reaper would spread throughout Vorthak space. It would become a warning, a reminder that humans were not the helpless creatures they appeared to be. It would make the aliens think twice before attacking human colonies or taking human prisoners. But more than that, it would inspire other humans who found themselves in impossible situations. It would remind them that sometimes the best weapon wasn't strength or advanced technology, it was the refusal to give up, the ability to adapt, and the willingness to turn any situation into an opportunity. Marcus Chen, mining engineer from Mars Colony, had become something new. The Vorthak had tried to break him, to turn him into entertainment. Instead, they had forged him into something harder, something more dangerous. They had created the Reaper. As the human ship's recovery bay doors closed around their escape pod, Marcus was already planning his next move. The Vorthak had made this personal when they took him prisoner. Now he was going to return the favor. The galaxy was about to learn that when you hunt humans, sometimes the human decides to hunt you back. And Marcus Chen had become very, very good at hunting. The war between humans and the Vorthak was about to change dramatically. The aliens had spent centuries believing they were the apex predators of their region of space. That was about to be challenged by someone who understood that true predators don't announce themselves with roars and displays of strength. True predators are patient. They study their prey, they wait for the perfect moment, and when they strike, their prey never sees them coming. The Reaper was loose in the galaxy, and the hunt was just beginning. 6 months after Marcus Chen's escape, the name Reaper had become a whispered legend throughout Vorthak space. At first, their commanders dismissed it as human propaganda, a story designed to boost morale among the inferior species they were conquering. They stopped dismissing it after the third Vorthak ship was found drifting empty in the void. Fleet Admiral Krex stood on the bridge of the Vorthak flagship Bone Crusher, staring at the tactical display that showed the latest attack. The destroyer, Painbringer, had been discovered by a patrol 3 days ago, its crew of 300 warriors dead. No survivors, no distress signal, no sign of external damage to the ship, just like the others. "How?" Krex demanded, his translated voice echoing in the command chamber. "How does one human board our ships undetected and kill trained warriors?" His intelligence officer, a scarred veteran named Voss, activated a holographic display. "We've analyzed all 3 incidents, Admiral. The pattern is consistent. Someone with intimate knowledge of our ship systems infiltrates during routine operations. They target key personnel first: communications, security, command staff. By the time the crew realizes they're under attack, it's too late." "One human," Krex repeated. "One weak, soft creature without natural weapons or armor." "Yes, Admiral, but this particular human has learned to think like us. No, he's learned to think better than us." The statement bordered on heresy. Vorthak culture was built on the belief that they were the superior warrior race in the galaxy. The idea that a human could outthink them was almost impossible to accept, but the evidence was undeniable. The first ship, the Bloodfang, had been found with its crew dead and a message burned into the hull. "For every human taken, 10 Vorthak will die. The Reaper." The second ship, the Skull Taker, had been discovered with its weapons turned on itself, the crew apparently forced to destroy their own vessel from within. The third ship showed signs of systematic hunting. The crew had been killed one by one over several days. "What do we know about this Reaper?" Krex asked. Voss consulted his datapad. "Real name: Marcus Chen, former mining engineer from Mars Colony, captured 6 months ago during a routine raid. Survived 37 days in the arena before escaping with classified intelligence." "I remember that incident. The human who killed one of our trainees." "Yes, Admiral. But that's not what makes him dangerous now. During his captivity, he studied us. He learned our language, our customs, our technology. He understands how we think, how we fight, how we operate our ships." Krex turned away from the tactical display. "And now he's using that knowledge against us. It's worse than that, Admiral. He's teaching other humans. Intelligence reports indicate that human raiders have adopted new tactics based on his methods. They're becoming more effective, more coordinated. The Reaper isn't just one human. He's becoming a symbol." The truth was even more complex than Voss realized. Marcus had indeed been teaching others, but not in the way the Vorthak intelligence officer imagined. He wasn't running training camps or writing tactical manuals. Instead, he was demonstrating that humans didn't have to be victims. After his rescue by the UES Defiance, Marcus had been debriefed by human military intelligence. His knowledge of Vorthak ship systems, combat doctrine, and culture was invaluable. But Marcus had no interest in sitting in comfortable offices, writing reports. He wanted to go back out there. The human military had initially resisted his requests for independent operations. Marcus was too valuable as an intelligence source to risk in combat. But after the first Vorthak ship was found empty, with his signature burned into the hull, they realized they had something unprecedented on their hands. Marcus Chen had become a psychological weapon more powerful than any fleet. The fourth attack came 2 weeks later. This time, Marcus chose a larger target, the heavy cruiser World's Eater, flagship of the Vorthak's Third Fleet. The ship carried a crew of over 1,000 warriors and was considered impregnable. Marcus approached it in a stolen Vorthak shuttle, broadcasting appropriate identification codes that he had acquired during one of his previous raids. The World's Eater's crew never suspected that their own communication protocols could be turned against them. He docked in the shuttle bay and walked through the ship's corridors wearing Vorthak armor taken from a dead soldier. The helmet's voice modulator made his speech indistinguishable from a real Vorthak's. To the crew, he was just another warrior returning from a mission. Marcus had spent months studying Vorthak ship designs, but the World's Eater was larger and more complex than anything he had infiltrated before. This wasn't just about sending a message, it was about proving that no Vorthak ship was safe, no matter how large or well defended. His first target was the ship's computer core. Unlike his escape from the original capture ship, Marcus now had equipment specifically designed for hacking alien systems. Sarah Kim had worked with human engineers to develop tools based on their shared experience with Vorthak technology. The computer core was heavily guarded, but Marcus had learned patience during his time in the arena. He waited for 6 hours, studying the guard rotations and identifying a 14-minute window when the core would be unmonitored. When he finally made his move, it was with the precision of someone who had planned every second. The guards never knew what hit them. Marcus accessed the ship's computer network and uploaded a virus that would gradually take control of all ship systems. Then he began to hunt. The crew of the World's Eater first realized something was wrong when the lights went out in Section 7. When a security team was sent to investigate, they found 3 dead guards and a message scrawled on the wall in Vorthak script, "The Reaper is here." Panic began to spread through the ship. The crew had heard the stories, had seen the wreckage of other vessels, but they were trained warriors aboard the most powerful ship in their fleet. Surely they could handle one human. They were wrong. Marcus moved through the ship like a ghost, using maintenance passages and service corridors that were too small for adult Vorthak to navigate easily. He struck without warning, killing key personnel and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack was precisely targeted to maximize psychological impact. The ship's captain, a veteran warrior named Thane, tried to organize a coordinated defense. But Marcus had anticipated this. The virus he had planted in the computer system began to interfere with internal communications. Orders were garbled or delayed. Security cameras showed false images. Ship sensors gave incorrect readings about his location. After 12 hours of hunting, Marcus controlled half the ship. The surviving crew members had barricaded themselves into defensive positions, but they were trapped and terrified. Many of them had never seen fear among their own kind before. Captain Thane finally made the decision that would cement Marcus's legend throughout Vorthak space. He activated the ship's self-destruct sequence, preferring to die with honor rather than be systematically killed by a human. But Marcus had anticipated this too. His virus had infected the self-destruct system, giving him control over the ship's most powerful weapon. Instead of destroying the World's Eater, the warheads that should have vaporized the vessel were redirected outward, creating a spectacular fireworks display visible from 3 neighboring star systems. Marcus's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, speaking perfect Vorthak with an accent that chilled the survivors to their core. Your ship belongs to me now. Your weapons belong to me. Your lives belong to me. Tell your leaders that the Reaper claims this vessel in the name of all humans who have suffered at your hands." The few dozen Vorthak survivors were herded into escape pods and launched toward the nearest Vorthak outpost. They carried with them a message that would spread fear throughout the entire Vorthak military. Their most powerful ships could be turned against them by a single human. Marcus took the World's Eater to a pre-arranged rendezvous point where a human fleet was waiting. The sight of a Vorthak heavy cruiser flying under human control was broadcast across the galaxy. Within days, it had become the most watched news footage in human space. But the psychological impact went far beyond simple propaganda. Human colonies that had been living in fear of Vorthak raids suddenly found themselves inspired to fight back. Human military recruitment increased by 300% in a single month. Most importantly, other species that had been conquered or threatened by the Vorthak began to see hope where there had been none before. The Reaper had shown that the Vorthak were not invincible. Fleet Admiral Krex knew his empire was facing its greatest crisis in centuries. The name Reaper had become a curse word among his warriors, a symbol of fear that was undermining military discipline. Ships' crews were refusing dangerous assignments. Planets were requesting additional defensive forces. Some commanders were even suggesting that the Vorthak should consider peace negotiations with the humans. That last suggestion nearly caused Krex to execute his own officers. He made the decision to end this personally. The flagship, Bone Crusher, would hunt down the Reaper and destroy him in a battle that would be broadcast throughout Vorthak space. It would prove that humans were still inferior, that one lucky individual could not stand against the might of the warrior race. Krex set a trap. Intelligence reports suggested that the Reaper was planning to attack a supply convoy near the asteroid belt. The convoy would proceed as scheduled, but the Bone Crusher and 3 escort ships would be waiting in ambush. What Krex didn't know was that Marcus had been feeding false information to Vorthak intelligence for weeks. The real target wasn't the supply convoy, it was the Bone Crusher itself. The battle began when the Vorthak flagship dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find a convoy of freighters. Instead, they found themselves facing a human battle fleet led by a captured Vorthak heavy cruiser with Reaper painted across its hull in letters that could be seen from orbit. But the real surprise came when the Bone Crusher's own weapon systems suddenly turned on the escort ships. Marcus had spent weeks infiltrating the flagship's computer network through quantum communication channels, planting viruses and backdoors that gave him control over critical systems. The Vorthak admiral watched in horror as his own ship destroyed 2 of his escorts before he could regain control. When he finally managed to override the computer system, he found a message waiting for him on his personal command screen. "Admiral Krex," the message read in perfect Vorthak script, "you chose to make this personal when you took human prisoners for sport. Now I choose to end it. Face me in single combat, warrior to warrior, or watch your fleet burn around you. Marcus Chen, the Reaper." Krex was faced with an impossible choice. If he refused the challenge, he would be branded a coward throughout Vorthak space. His own warriors would lose respect for him, but if he accepted, he would be fighting on terms chosen by his enemy. He chose to accept. The alternative was unthinkable for a Vorthak commander. The duel took place on the observation deck of the Bone Crusher, with both fleets watching. Krex was 8 feet tall, covered in battle scars, and armed with weapons that had killed dozens of warriors in personal combat. He had never lost a duel in 30 years of military service. Marcus wore simple human combat armor and carried the same steel blade he had used in the arena months before. To the watching Vorthak, it looked like a joke. How could this small, weak creature challenge their greatest admiral? They learned the answer in the first 30 seconds of the fight. Marcus had spent 6 months studying Vorthak combat techniques, learning not just how to fight them, but how to predict their moves. He knew that Krex would open with the traditional four-blade assault, that the Admiral's pride would prevent him from using unconventional tactics. When Krex attacked, Marcus wasn't where he expected him to be. The human had analyzed the Admiral's previous duels, had studied recordings of his fighting style. He knew that Krex favored his upper right arm, that he had an old injury that affected his left leg's mobility, that his ceremonial armor had weak points designed for display rather than protection. The duel lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. When it was over, Fleet Admiral Krex, Supreme Commander of the Vorthak Third Fleet, lay dead on the deck of his own flagship. Marcus stood over his body, not even breathing hard, looking up at the Vorthak bridge crew who were staring at him in shock. "Your admiral is dead," Marcus announced in perfect Vorthak. "Your fleet is defeated. Your people will remember this day as the beginning of the end of your empire. Tell your leaders that the Reaper offers them one choice: withdraw from human space and leave us in peace, or face the consequences of continued war." The psychological impact of Krex's defeat was immediate and devastating. Within hours, reports were flooding in of Vorthak crews abandoning their ships rather than risk facing the Reaper. Entire fleets began withdrawing from contested systems. Colonial governors who had ruled human populations with iron fists suddenly found themselves facing rebellions they couldn't control. But the most significant change was in how other species viewed both humans and the Vorthak. The warrior race that had been expanding its territory for centuries was now in retreat, beaten not by superior numbers or technology, but by a single human who had refused to accept defeat. Marcus Chen returned to human space as the most famous person in the galaxy. He had proven that humans belonged among the stars not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they were the most adaptable. When faced with impossible odds, they found a way to win. The name Reaper became a legend that spread far beyond human space. It reminded every species in the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the biggest weapons or the strongest army. Sometimes it was the one who understood that survival meant being willing to become whatever the situation required. Marcus had entered Vorthak space as a captured mining engineer. He left as something new, a symbol of human resilience that would inspire generations to come. The galaxy had learned that when you thought you were hunting humans, sometimes you discovered that the humans were hunting you back. And Marcus Chen had become very, very good at hunting. The Vorthak Empire's expansion ended not with a massive battle or a formal surrender, but with the simple recognition that they had awakened something they couldn't control. The name Reaper would be remembered for centuries as the turning point when humanity announced to the galaxy that they were not prey. They were predators who had simply been waiting for someone to teach them how to hunt.